So we're going to wrap up our discussion of predicates the same way we did our earlier discussion of propositional logic, by looking at arguments and thinking about how we can determine if the form of an argument is valid or not. Now, there's a formal, rigorous approach that you can use to determining the validity of an argument with predicates, but it's a little beyond the level of an introductory class. So the approach we're going to use is a visual one using what are called Euler diagrams. So if you're already familiar with Venn diagrams, then Euler diagrams are also going to feel very familiar. Right, so where Venn diagrams use circles to represent all the elements in a set, Euler diagrams use circles to represent all of the objects in a category. For example, looking at this universal statement, I would start with a circle to represent all of the firemen. Now, for the brave component, I need to add a second circle that represents brave people and that shows this all relationship. Now, since all means that every member of the fireman group is also in the brave group, I'll represent this by drawing the fireman circle contained in the brave people circle. And so that's how we would diagram a universal statement. Right, now, to illustrate an existential statement, like some firemen are brave, right, I'll use the same two circles, right, but now I'm going to draw them overlapping to illustrate that some firemen are in the brave people category, but some firemen, other firemen, are not. They are outside of that category. All right, so finally, to illustrate a no relationship, I'll use the same two circles again, but this time drawing them disjoint so that none of the objects or people in the fireman group are also in the brave people group. All right, so let's see how we can use these three basic types to validate or invalidate an argument. So what I have here is something that we already know is valid, right? If you look closely, you'll see that this is just an example of universal instantiation. Now, the first part, all firemen are brave, is something we saw how to diagram already. We saw that on the previous slide. So I'll do brave people, and I'll put the fireman circle inside of that, representing the universal or the all type of statement. Now, for the second statement, to illustrate an individual rather than a group, we'll use a dot rather than a circle. Right? Since we know that John is a fireman, the dot has to go inside the fireman circle, which also forces it to be in the brave circle as well, right? And that's what gives us our final conclusion, right? Being in the fireman circle means John must also be in the brave circle, which is what we have in our conclusion here. So based on this diagram, we can conclude that this argument, this specific argument or this argument form is valid. All right, so in the next lecture, we're going to continue this discussion by looking at some more complex argument forms, seeing how we can diagram them using these Euler diagrams, and then come to a conclusion about their validity.